Let's go, Buffalo! Bet you didn't know that the man who put Frank Lloyd Wright on the map died broke in Buffalo, and Wright never paid back a single cent of the $70,000 he owed him. His name was Darwin D. Martin. Most people have never heard of him, which is strange because without Darwin Martin, there might not be Frank Lloyd Wright, at least not the Wright the world came to worship. The year is 1902. Darwin is the corporate secretary of the Larkin Soap Company, the most powerful administrative mind behind one of Buffalo's biggest corporations. His brother William, living in Chicago, passes along a name, a young architect nobody has quite figured out what to do with yet, Frank Lloyd Wright. Darwin doesn't just take the recommendation, he goes to Larkin's president, John D. Larkin himself, and convinces him to hand this untested visionary one of the biggest commissions of the era, a brand new headquarters building on Seneca Street. What rises on that block will change the way the world thinks about where people work. The Larkin Administration Building becomes one of the most revolutionary commercial structures ever built. The first office building with central air conditioning, with furniture designed specifically for the people who'd use it, with suspended toilet fixtures so the floors could be mopped clean without obstruction. Frank Lloyd Wright arrives on the national stage. Darwin Martin is the man who put him there. And at that exact same moment, Darwin Martin asks Wright to build him a house. Not just a house, a compound. 6 interconnected structures on Jewett Parkway in Buffalo. The main residence, a carriage house, a gardener's cottage, a pergola stretching 250 feet through the grounds, a conservatory, and a smaller house next door for his sister and brother-in-law. When the last work finishes in 1909, it is the largest and most complex prairie-style home Frank Lloyd Wright has ever designed. Critics will eventually call it the finest domestic architecture of the 20th century. There is a detail you don't find in the glossy architectural histories. Isabel Martin, Darwin's wife, was nearly blind, and the prairie-style interior Wright designed, intentionally dim with horizontal light bands rather than open bright windows, was nearly impossible for her to navigate. She eventually refused to sleep in the master bedroom. Darwin loved the house. Isabel endured it. Darwin Martin is 44 years old. He is at the top of his world, and Frank Lloyd Wright owes him everything. But here is where the story gets complicated, because the architect Darwin Martin just made famous is almost constantly out of money. Over the years, Wright comes back to Darwin Martin again and again. He lends him more than $70,000. He keeps meticulous records, every loan, every letter, every number in the ledger. And he records, eventually, what Wright paid back. The number is 0, not a dime returned.
Not one written apology. Darwin keeps lending anyway because he believes in the work and because he is the kind of man who keeps believing even when the math says stop. Now you might wonder, how does a man who can afford a 6-building estate on Jewett Parkway not simply absorb a $70,000 loss and move on? October 1929 is the answer. The stock market collapse didn't just hurt Darwin Martin, it wiped him out. Almost everything. That is the phrase historians use for what the Depression took from him. The man who built the finest house in Buffalo was suddenly a man who couldn't afford a $6 book. When Frank Lloyd Wright published his autobiography and priced it at $6, Darwin Martin, the man who made Wright's career, could not buy a copy. He died in Buffalo in December 1935, 70. His wife Isabel moved out of the house on Jewett Parkway 2 years later. She never returned. And here's something the architectural histories don't always say out loud. The house didn't notice. The first winter after Isabel left, snow got inside. Then more winters came and more snow got in, and eventually the snowdrifts inside the living room were several feet high. The roof gave in places, the windows cracked, the doors wouldn't close or wouldn't open, and the teenagers of the neighborhood figured out that this empty prairie masterpiece with its broad open floors and broken locks made an excellent roller rink. The greatest house Frank Lloyd Wright ever designed was being used as a skating rink by Buffalo kids. By 1946, the back taxes had grown to $75,000, more than what it cost to build the main house, and the city foreclosed. The Diocese of Buffalo purchased the property in 1951 and left it empty. An architect named Sebastian Torriello bought the main house in 1953 and did what you did with oversized empty mansions in the post-war decade. He carved it into 3 apartments. Then he sold the surrounding land to a developer who had different plans. In 1962, the developer demolished the pergola, the conservatory, the carriage house, 3 of Wright's 6 original structures, reduced to rubble, to make room for a 20-unit apartment building. It bears noting, because this story demands it, that the Larkin administration was already gone by then. The other landmark Darwin Martin made possible, the office block on Seneca Street that launched Wright's national career, had been sold to a wrecking crew in 1949 after the Larkin Company went bankrupt. It took 6 months to tear down because the concrete was so dense. The rubble was dumped into a harbor basin. Today, it is a city park. The 2 greatest buildings Darwin Martin put on this earth, both gone from Buffalo's skyline within 12 years of each other. Now, consider what went into the rubble in 1962. In 1983, 21 years after the demolition, a single art glass door from the Martin House sold at auction for $110,000. That set a world record for any Wright-designed object. The complex had 450 windows. Each window was assembled from up to 750 individual hand-cut pieces of art glass. Multiply that by whatever fraction of those windows went into the demolition debris. So here is the question the city eventually had to answer. What do you do after you watch one of the most important houses in American architecture get sliced into apartments and partly demolished for rentals? The University at Buffalo had bought the main house in 1967 for $60,100. That might be the most consequential $60,000 ever spent in this city. But owning a building and restoring a building are 2 different things. And for years, the house sat in institutional limbo while the apartment complex next door occupied the footprint of what used to stand there. The turn came in 1992. A coalition of preservationists, architects, and advocates formed what would become the Martin House Restoration Corporation. Emergency stabilization work started in 1993. The full restoration began in earnest in 1995. It did not stop for 26 years. The final bill? $52 million. But here's what separates this story from every other architectural rescue you have ever read about. HHL architects tracked down 70 of Wright's original construction drawings in the archives, the specifications, the dimensions, the exact details, and used them to rebuild the pergola, the conservatory, and the carriage house, exactly as Wright had designed them, at their original sites, in period-accurate materials. The 3 structures a developer had demolished in 1962 rose again, piece by piece. It may be the first time in architectural history that demolished Frank Lloyd Wright buildings have been reconstructed at their original location, not relocated, not approximated, reconstructed from the original drawings on the same ground. What the wrecking crew took down in 1962, Buffalo spent a generation putting back exactly where it belonged. The house rededicated in 2006. The rebuilt wings were finished by 2007. The Visitor Center, the Great Batch Pavilion, designed by architect Toshiko Mori, opened in 2009. The full restoration finished in 2019. 125 Jewett Parkway is whole again. Darwin Martin died before anyone would believe this was possible. Frank Lloyd Wright died in 1959 before he could see what his meticulous drawings made possible decades later. But what they built together, one precise Buffalo businessman who kept every letter and never once called in the debt, and one restless genius who borrowed from whoever would lend, is standing today on the west side of Buffalo, open for tours exactly as it was meant to be. So, the next time someone says Buffalo doesn't know how to take care of beautiful things, you know exactly what to say. Did we get it right? Heard it told differently? Know a story we should tell next? The comments are yours. Then like and subscribe. There's plenty more where this came from. And now you know. Let's go Buffalo!